Ibi?
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this live stream. Today, we're going to be speaking about a very important topic, which is dawa during times of distress. Just before going live, I was reading up again on the story of Burq Khan. I'm sure, Sheikh, you've heard this story. So Burq Khan
Yeah.
was was a descendant, a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. He was in the city of Bukhara. He was part of, if you like, the oppressive force, the Mongols, and he was given dawah to by people who he met, some Muslims that he met. He converted to Islam. He invited his brother to accept Islam, and when he went back to Mongolia, part of their one of the things that they used to do was select the great Khan from amongst the children of Genghis Khan, something that they used to call the Kurlatai. While he was there, he invited the families, right all the way to the top of the hierarchy of the Mongols to Islam. They didn't accept Islam, but that story is relevant for us today because of the suffering that we're seeing in the world. And recently, you gave an interview, which has been going around social media, and a lot of people resonated with the message that the
Mm,
Palestinians had for you, Sheikh, when you were there many years ago. So,
yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting that one of the things, like I guess one of the few, I mean, I think I wouldn't say few because there's many really. I mean, it's very easy to despair and be despondent when we see the tests and the trials the Muslims are going through. But we always have to remember that we always, as Muslims, believe that whatever Allah has decreed for us is for the best. And as miserable and horrific as it may seem, there are many different benefits that these things have for us as believers, both individually and collectively. And there's no doubt that amongst the many things that is a byproduct of what is happening right now in Gaza is an awakening. There is a massive awakening amongst Muslims and non-Muslims. And I think this is what is really fascinating and really interesting and not surprising to me at all. It's not surprising to me that many non-Muslims have had their curiosity about Islam sparked by watching the behavior and the faith and the fact that these people, the Palestinians who are going through so much trauma, unimaginable levels of trauma, yet they're still thanking God, they're still praising God, they're still turning to God. And it's a sort of proof of faith
yeah,
that these people are just not used to seeing it. And it's something that has spurred them to investigate further. So it's none of these things are particularly surprising to me. Um, Alhamdulillah, and it's one of the blessings, one of the. I think there are many blessings, like I said, many, and all of these things we have to believe that as Muslims, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, everything happens to the believer is good. Everything. If you are a believer, everything that happens is good, because if some calamity falls upon you and some distress seizes you, even if a thorn pricks your foot, like even if a thorn, pricks your finger or pricks your foot, you feel some sadness or some depression, whether it's a mental anguish or it's physical pain, even a small amount, it's good for you,
mm,
because through it, Allah, God, there's actually many things that happen through it. Some of it is that God expiates some of your sins. He raises your levels in paradise. In other words, you will achieve a level in paradise that you would not have achieved otherwise, except through these tests and trials. But also, I guess most importantly, it is a sign of love that Allah tests the people that He loves. It is
yeah,
only it is like the ore of the iron, the ore of the metal, whether it's gold or iron or any metal. You get this ore, this thing that is just a rock. You put it in the fire. Through that process of going through the pressure and the heat and all the forces that are upon it, out of it comes something pure and useful and beneficial. So that's how we should always look at trials, whether it's individually, whether it's you and me, as sabur or collectively as the whole ummah, or whether it's as a family, trials are a way that Allah improves us if we are patient. If we are patient.
Yeah.
And another benefit is that we turn to Allah, we make dua, we call upon Allah. It strengthens our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It increases our reliance and our trust in God. And these are the very things that are manifesting themselves, perhaps in a way that never has before.
Yeah.
Through the lens of social media, is allowed people to see this up close and personal. I guess in a way that, you know, in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people would have seen it in person, right? The mushrik Quraysh would have seen the Muslims going through all their trials and difficulties and problems and how they persevered, and because the same thing for many of them, it was similarly transformative.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing non-Muslims. But I think the main thing, Sabur, we have to think about and that we have to discuss is, are we the Muslims of the West, particularly because this interest is, as far as we can see, particularly manifesting itself in the West? Are we ready? Are we ready to explain to people what Islam is? Are we ready to really fulfill these people's curiosity? Yes, we can give them a translation of the Quran, and then what? Are we ready ourselves to explain to them why Islam has this transformative power? Are we ready? Are we ourselves examples? See, this is the crazy thing, is that, you know, and I have a little bit of sympathy with some of those people who are saying, there are all these people who go on protests. They call themselves Muslim. They'll go on protests. And I am, you know, I've had a discussion about this. I'm not against protests at all. I don't think there's anything wrong with them within the right context. And they could even be beneficial, barring some caveats. I had a discussion with Dr. Abdul Haq Baker. We had a long discussion about it. I don't need to repeat that here. But the point is that, but if you yourself are not praying 5 times a day, if you yourself are not worshiping Allah, if you yourself are not, you know, I have to ask you, what is the purpose of these demonstrations? Now, some people say, well, it's just our humanity. You don't need to be a Muslim to do this. You just need to be human. Okay, very nice soundbite. Okay, but it just shows how if you say that, you are pitifully ignorant of the purpose of life and the reason for your existence, right? And maybe, of course, any goodness you do in this life, we believe as Muslims, any good you do in this life, you will get rewarded for it. But if you don't have iman, your reward will only stay in this life. You will not benefit on the day of judgment. You will not benefit. The prerequisite for you to benefit on the day of judgment when you meet Allah is to have iman, is to be his worshipper, to worship him alone without any partners. That is the prerequisite. Without it, you're doomed. You will be in the same place as those people you are protesting about.
Yeah.
The same people you are protesting about, you're going to end up sharing that destination with them. Because in the sight of Allah, the most important thing is that you single him out alone for worship. And then I have to remind all my brothers and sisters listening right here, right now, you know, and if any of you follow me on Instagram or on social media, you can see for yourself the amount of effort and the amount of time that I am putting into posting, reposting articles and things that are going on about, you know, what's happening right now. I'm not blind to it. I'm not oblivious to it. But back in the days, Sabur, 20, 30 years ago, we were still, you know, having all of these discussions about Palestine. And I remember when we used to do, before we started doing the Islamic exhibition in Leeds University, and I'm talking now about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, right? This is how long this has been going on for.
Yeah.
It didn't just start now. the idea of dawah, what the brothers in the Leeds University, and a lot of them were Arabs, their idea of dawah was a Palestine Awareness Day. That's what their exhibition was about. It was about in the Islamic Awareness Week, it was all about Palestine. Now, I'm all for highlighting and, helping oppressed people wherever they may be, especially the oppressed Muslims. But look, the dawah is not to Palestine. The dawah is not to Palestine. It is not to building another nation. We don't need another nation on this planet. We don't need any more nationalism. We don't need any more of that jingoistic nationalism. We don't need it. We need, what the world needs is Islam. What the world needs is to return to Allah. What humanity needs is the message of La ilaha illallah. And this may sound raw, and it may sound insensitive, and it may sound like, oh, this is not the time to mention it. But in reality, brothers and sisters, there is no better time to mention it. No better time to remind you that the solution to all of these problems, of all of these issues, whatever problems and issues beset humanity, the root cause of every evil is that we human beings have turned our backs to Allah. We have turned our backs to his religion. We have not fulfilled our covenant, our promise, our commitment to call humanity to learn. This is the trust that Allah offered to the mountains. He offered it to the rivers and to the seas, and he offered it to the creatures, and they all rejected it. But we human beings, we took it upon ourselves. What was that covenant? What was that promise? What was that commitment that we made? Actually, to manifest La ilaha illallah, that we would worship Allah alone, and that we would be responsible for making sure that this was the reality upon the earth. Everyone, by the way, everyone committed themselves to that.
Yeah.
Joe Biden, Netanyahu, every rabbi, every Hindu pundit, those, whatever his name is, that leader of India, I don't even want to speak. Modi, yeah. Modi, yeah. All of them. Wallahi, they all promised. They all made this commitment. What? To worship their false gods? To follow their false religions? Yeah. No, they committed themselves to establish La ilaha illallah on this earth. Anyone who is not doing that is treacherous. Now, some people may have an excuse, really genuinely. Who knows? Wouldn't that be scary? Wouldn't that be scary that some people, we are lambasting them, have an excuse because they don't know, because no one gave them dawah. No one told them about Islam. No one explained to them what Islam was. How about us, brothers and sisters? How about us, Sabur, right? We are the Muslims. What are we, really, again and again and again, it shocks me, our lack of commitment to spreading the religion of Islam. And you started with something very, very important, a very important story, by the way, which is just one of hundreds of similar stories in our history. In fact, in the history of the world, Sabur, look at Surah Al-Kahf. Look at Surah Al-Kahf. Yeah. What is Surah Al-Kahf about? Right? It's interesting that this surah, the first 10 ayat of Surah Al-Kahf, is a protection against a Dajjal. So there is a connection between this surah and what it says and the end times, right? You can't help but make that connection. Now, what is the main theme of this surah, which it's named after? A group of youths who are living amongst idol worshippers, who are giving dawah to their people, but they were unable, not only were they unable to make headway, their lives were threatened, so they fled, right? They fled to the cave, they took refuge in this cave, and then Allah made them sleep for 300 years. And then what happened? When they woke up, society had changed, right? Suddenly then they found that the people were believers. How did that happen? Because people like them and people who followed them, they were giving dawah, they were calling to La ilaha illallah. Look at the story of Dhul Qarnayn, who traveled from one end of the earth to the other, to the, you could say, the four corners of the earth.
Yeah.
Okay, calling people to Tawheed, spreading the message of Islam. This is what he was doing. Look at Musa alayhi salam, is also mentioned, and how Allah rescued him and Bani Israel from the evil of Fir'aun. So you go through the Quran and you see this theme of dawah, this theme of calling people to Allah, this theme of calling people to the worship of Allah is coming again and again and again. And I think the only people who will not understand that are people who don't read the Quran. And maybe they read it, but they don't understand it. So it's hugely important. And like I said, this is something that has repeated itself in history over and over again.
Yeah.
Not just with, as you mentioned, with the Mongols, who many of them converted to Islam, but other times start with the Quraysh. You see, you start with the Quraysh. They were the implacable enemies of Islam, but then they became the people who spread Islam. And you see how Islam spread from one end of the world to the other. And you'll find this theme happening again and again and again. So this is something that, subhanAllah, we need to take a lesson from. The importance of dawah, the importance of calling to Allah. And it reminds me of something else I was reading, a very interesting book, and it's titled The Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah, Ryan Holiday.
Yeah, The Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It tells this story, this story of a king he wanted to see, how determined his people were and how committed they were to, like improving things. He was very busy doing everything for them, but he wanted to see, were they capable of doing something for themselves? So what he did is, one night secretly, he put a huge rock blocking the gateway to the city. And this is the main gateway through which all the trade came, and this is what caused the city to be extremely prosperous. And he sat there waiting to see what his people would do. And inevitably, as the story goes, most people just turned away. They did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. They made no effort to move this rock. They made no effort to do anything about it. In fact, all they did was complain about the king and did nothing themselves. Except one day, one poor guy comes and he just sees this rock in the way, and he's sitting there looking at it, and then he goes away and he gets some more logs and gets some logs and gets a tree, and eventually, after all of this effort, he levers this, he uses his strength and his ingenuity to lever this huge rock out of the way, and underneath it is a letter from the king and like a bag of gold, right? So the whole purpose of the story is the obstacle is the way. It is in the obstacle itself that you find the solution. This is what is really, really interesting, and that is something everybody needs to contemplate. I don't even see, we've been through this, Sabur, you and me, right? In our era, we've come across many, many obstacles, but we don't look at them as obstacles. We don't even think of them, oh, this is an obstacle. No, we think this is a challenge that Allah is giving us to see how can we solve it and what benefit can we, get from it. So when COVID came along, you remember, right? It was like our whole dawah, our whole organization, as anyone listening in our era, is built upon is paying du'at who go out into the jungle, into the forest, into the mountains, into the villages, into the streets, and give dawah face to face. And COVID came along and stopped it because people were locked in their homes, right? Now we could have just said, well, that's it. We better fold up our organization. We better stop now because all the things that we are doing, we can't do it anymore. So we just put a hole in it. No, we thought to ourselves, okay, there is an obstacle and Allah is trying to get us to do something else. Allah is showing us the way. Allah is showing us a different way. And what was that different way? What did we start doing? We started doing online dawah. And now the online dawah portal, and we started getting our du'ats, getting them online, opening chat rooms, And it's one of the most successful things that we do in terms of getting conversations and, alhamdulillah, getting shahadas. It's
Yeah.
massive, alhamdulillah, and the benefit is huge. And any da'i, any one of our da'is who for some reason can't go out or whatever, well, they can just go online and they can start. And that's a huge opportunity. By the way, anyone listening, if you want to get involved in dawah and you don't feel like going on the street, or you think it means giving dawah means going to speaker's corner and shouting, screaming like I used to do, and now the brothers march. Some of them still same old guys. Mansour, mashallah, he was there back in the days when I was there, and he's still doing it, alhamdulillah. But yeah, I mean, you know, you don't have to do that. Obviously not. You can go online. That's one of the things we want to do, Sabor, bro, isn't it? We want to. Maybe you can tell everyone a little bit about some of the things that we offer for ordinary people about giving
Yeah.
down. Yeah.
So the thing about the online chat, just wanted to add that I recently came back from Nigeria, and our du'at there on the ground who work for IRA full time, paid du'at, they actually they actually can't match the results that are given by the Nigerian volunteers for the One Reason chat. So you know, the obstacle is the way. Every single problem is actually a challenge to grow. So anybody that wants to get involved, I'll put a link for you guys to look at the volunteering program. What I would say to anybody that wants to volunteer is, don't expect that if you're going to stay away from, say, direct one-to-one dawah in terms of the street, that, oh, here's an easy way of doing it, which is the chat, because the chat also has challenges. And in fact, the intensity of the chat can actually give you a headache. I remember when the chat first started, and sometimes when you run these adverts, we didn't know exactly the power of these ads. So sometimes the ads used to get supercharged, and we were bombarded with questions from non-Muslims, and it was literally like one message, another message, another message. And other times Allah tests you in a different way, that the ads are being blocked or certain things are happening, and what's it called, less people are talking. But now we have a very good balance. So if you join the chat, we know how many people are there. You'll get trained, whether you're a brother or sister. You'll go through all of our online portal, and inshallah on the other end you will actually meet brothers and sisters who are involved in the chat, and then you'll have an entire program for you to follow. So we'll put a link up there. But Sheikh, I really loved your reference to the obstacle is the way, because sometimes as Muslims, we want the easiest route, we want the easiest fix, we want the we want the easiest thing to do. And you know, I do want you to remind us of when you went to Palestine, and the solution that they gave you was not to go back and protest. It was something else, wasn't it? So if you can explain that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, and I mean, you know, I think that, to be fair, at the time, you know, like you know, I've heard some of our brothers point out, like Sheikh Umar Hajjaj, you know, who's been attending protests since he was like, you know, 6 years old or something. I still think I've been involved in it longer than him, but still, you know, but he said, you know, there was nothing but a few hundred people and a few lefties, and now they're like absolutely massive. You know, we're talking about 1 million people, I heard at the last demonstration, which is massive, right? It just shows the benefit of sticking with things and persevering, and I think they do have an effect. But you know, having said that, it is interesting that, you know, as to repeat the story, you can hear the full interview. But yeah, the brothers, you know, after these 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is we spent in you know, going around Palestine, and seeing all sorts of, you know, very, very sad and also very inspiring and incredible things as well. The brothers who were taking us around, we asked them, well, what should we do now we go back to England? You know, what do you suggest that we do? How can we help the cause? And the brothers said, go and call the people to Islam. And I think no one was expecting that at all. No, and sadly, I don't think anyone really followed it through. At least, except, I don't want to say I'm the only one who did it, because I mean, I was doing that anyway. It wasn't like the guys told me to do it, therefore that's just what I was very much committed to anyway, through my, you know, going to Speaker's Corner and, you know, giving talks in universities and, you know, Leicester Square and stuff. But I think what the important thing is what is really fascinating is, you know, normally when, you know, someone is really immersed in something very deeply, you almost can't see anything except the situation you're in, right? And you almost begin to see everything through that particular lens as well, right? That's the other thing, is that everything you look at, you begin to look at it through that particular lens of your narrow focus, of whatever test and tribulation you're going through. And I think what was remarkable for me was this brother's ability to see the bigger picture. Despite everything he was going through, he saw the bigger picture. And that's something that came from his Islam. That's something that came from his deen. That's something that came from his commitment. Because for him, this was the early days, of the first Intifada. And it was the beginning of when people were moving away from Arab nationalism. They were not anymore looking towards a socialist, nationalist, secularist solution. They'd seen it. They'd seen all of that, and they'd seen it fail, and they'd seen the Arab armies, we shouldn't say the Muslim armies, the Arab nationalist armies defeated and crushed, right? And they had seen all of these nationalist, secularist movements go nowhere and lead to nothing. And, they were beginning to remember that they are Muslim and their glorious history and, subhanAllah, the glories of Islam. And so it began. So it was a movement that was inspired by their Islamic values more than anything else. That was what is interesting about it. So this distinguishing factor about this brother is his commitment to Islam. In fact, all of the guys who were showing us around were very committed to Islam. And this is the feeling that we got, the people we were seeing, the people we were talking to. It was the Islamic revival was happening amongst them. People were praying, and many of them didn't used to pray. They were fasting, like even in prison they were fasting Mondays and Thursdays, subhanAllah. This is how it was, right? I remember there was a story of this kid who, I don't know, whatever, something, his uncle or someone was in prison, and they were talking about it, and and he was telling his uncle off, or his uncle was telling us how his nephew had been telling him off for not fasting on Mondays and Thursdays, while he obviously had an excuse, but that was like shocked, like, you didn't fast on a Monday and a Thursday. Like, I'm just saying that this is the background to what this brother was saying. So and this is something, I think is really important. It's something that, unfortunately, with the onset of nationalism, which is, a pernicious, wicked plot of shaitan to take us away from some core aspects of our religion. And I really, I think, unfortunately, it's another thing that generally we should spend a lot more time combating, this evil of nationalism, and reminding everybody that we are one ummah. We are the ummah of Muhammad. We are the people of La ilaha illallah. We are not Pakistanis and Bengalis and Indians and Moroccans. And, everyone's so proud to be Moroccan and Tunisian and Algerian and Palestinian. And no. What is this? What is this really? 50 years ago, these places didn't even exist. 70 years ago, these places didn't even exist. There was no Pakistan. There was no Bangladesh. They didn't exist.
Yeah, and
how
those
are you so proud? And a lot of them were created by the British anyway.
Yeah. And those Pakistani weddings that you're so fond of. I'm just remembering that clip, that famous clip. The one that Pakistani nationalists are really upset. Yeah. So Sheikh, I think you hit upon something which is really interesting. In fact, I think a lot of young people don't know of this. I mean, anyone born, say, after the year 2000 wouldn't be aware that there was a time when, like you said, it wasn't an Islamic cause. It was a Arab nationalist, pan-Arabism sort of variety of causes that they were supporting, and Palestine was one of them. And, maybe that's one of the ways that nationalism, Allah made it fail in the
Yeah,
eyes of people.
I believe it 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Six-Day War is an example of that. You know, okay, so I think one of the things which is important to note here is we now are living in a world where everybody can see what's happening, and you know, the media can't, you know, have a monopoly on its narrative. So you get TikTokers who are you know, young people, they're watching videos of people in
Mhm.
Palestine, and then they're researching Islam, they're converting to Islam. Some people are coming to Islam through emotion. Some people are coming to Islam with emotions being a segue, but actually they're getting a deeper understanding. And in fact, a lot of people are genuinely interested in the faith of the Palestinians, the faith of the, we should
Mhm.
just say, generally the faith of the Muslims in these distressing times. So when you were a non-Muslim, when you were looking at you know, all of these conflicts in the Middle East, and
Mhm.
I'm sure you must have come across this idea that the Muslims are very resilient, and I'm sure you must have seen that in your time in Egypt as well.
Yeah.
How do you see that as a factor to attract people towards Islam?
Well, I think, the reality is that people are going through an existential crisis, and they have been for a long time. People are questioning fundamental assumptions about, Western civilization. And I think one of the things is that the whole situation right now is laid bare totally is all this talk about international law, human rights, labeling certain people as terrorists. Everyone just is beginning to realize it's all hypocrisy. It's all, it doesn't mean anything. It's all really a sham and it's a lie. And I think that's the big first step. But we see what happens with that is a big existential crisis, because the things that you believed in and the things that you had faith in, suddenly you realize that they're false. You're worshiping a false god. And with that comes the questions, well, what is it all for? What's life about? And so I think when people are asking these questions, this is a huge opportunity, because I do believe that Islam offers a very, very rational, logical, and it's not just rational and logical. I've been thinking about this, and again, one of the beautiful things about Islam is that it's such a balanced way of life. Now, people may not think of that. They may not think, they may not instinctively think about Islam being rational and Islam being balanced. But that's because we already have a very, very warped view of what we think reality is. If you have a completely materialistic viewpoint, and so let's take that as an example, right? So take an example of another religion that, it demands an almost, complete Buddhism, for example, in its ideal form as practiced by Buddha and his immediate followers, demands a complete monasticism, and it actually demands a complete renunciation of the world. And it's very, Buddhism struggled from the very beginning, from its very foundations, of how to manifest itself practically, because although it was showing that, okay, here's a way to achieve enlightenment, it was soon realized that, well, not everybody can do that, because if everybody does it, humanity will literally collapse and cease to exist. So it needed some, benevolent kings to build monasteries in which these particular few individuals could therefore go and spend their time meditating and contemplating until they reach enlightenment. But so therefore, it's not really a supremely practical religion for everybody to follow. So I'm showing this as an example of a particular idea of religion that is extremely spiritual, but has no real connection with actual worldly existence,
Yeah.
right? And of course, you have on the other extreme pure materialism, when there is no spirituality, involved whatsoever.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing about Islam, and this is built into Islam, it's not something that has been artificially transposed onto Islam in the same way, by the way, you feel it has with Christianity. If you actually look at what Jesus said and what he taught, you know, hey, don't hate your enemy, don't resist your enemy, turn the other cheek. If your enemy strikes you, give him the other cheek to strike, right? How does that, you know, how does therefore someone joining the American army, right, and claiming to be an evangelical Christian, believing in Jesus, how do you reconcile that, right?
Yeah.
Well, they reconcile that because a long time ago, when Christianity got taken over by the Roman Empire, they started developing and inventing their own theology to try and justify it. That had nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus. It's very clear that Jesus was extremely pacifist in his teachings, right? So they invented a whole, they tried to invent, they themselves had to invent a system that tried to find some sort of balance between that. But this balance between living a life where you are spiritual, where you are connected to God, as well as living a normal worldly life, is built into Islam. It's not something that is artificially imposed in it. It's part of the religion from the beginning, right? So Muslims, we pray 5 times a day. We fast regularly in the month of Ramadan, right? We have regular acts of worship that we perform, regular acts of charity that we perform. Yet we trade, we buy, we sell, we live in this world, we marry, we have children. All of these things are encouraged as actual religious virtues as well, if they are done also in a way that is moral and virtuous and pleasing to God. And this is what I'm talking about, this beautiful balance. You'll find it again and again and again in Islam. When you start to look at it, you'll find this beautifully balanced way of life. And I think this is something that people will find very, very attractive about Islam. They will find it, inshallah, very, very attractive. And I think the more you look into it, the more you study it, the deeper you go into it, you begin to realize this is not something any human being could come up with. This is something that comes from an intelligence greater than human intelligence.
Yes.
This is something that comes from a deep understanding of the needs of human beings that is way beyond what any one person or even a group of people could have come up with. And it's in itself that the Islamic way of life is really a sort of evidence of its divine origin as well. I mean, I'm sure, I know we've had this discussion, but, you know, for me, you know, and I do believe, you know, Islam, I'm sure we can show rationally it makes a lot of rational sense, but ultimately, probably the greatest evidence of Islam is when you follow it and you live it and you see how it transforms your life. That, in a way, is its greatest, you know, evidence. As we say, you know, we say the proof is in the pudding. That's what we say, you know, that's the, you know, the evidence is in actually eating it and living it and experiencing it. And
so just on that point, I wanted to add, one of the things which a lot of people are thinking about when they're seeing the images coming out of Gaza, and this is linked to your point about the proof is in the pudding, that Islam works when you apply it in your life. One of the biggest issues, not one of the biggest issues, the biggest issue in the human experience is death, is even thinking about death and mortality. And when people are seeing, you have an ideology which is allowing people to cope with death, allowing people to cope with death of their loved ones, holding their dead ones, and still saying Alhamdulillah, still praising Allah, still believing. I think for a lot of people, it's not just a simple it's not just that there's a conflict going on and now they're interested in Islam because they're looking at people. And no, it's I think my personal view is that it's probably because something to do with death. They're seeing death and destruction, and people are able to withstand the pressure of death and destruction, and they're thinking, I want to have that. Because look, human beings don't really make decisions for rational reasons. No one really does. It's a minority of people. If someone wants to follow secular liberalism or feminism or whatever it is, it's usually because that's in line with what they want to, the lifestyle they want to live. People are looking at that and they're thinking, I'm actually scared of death. I may have stage 3 cancer. In the future, something may happen. I may get hit by a car. How are these individuals dealing with death in this particular way?
Yeah.
For you, as when you were a non-Muslim, was that something that made you think about Islam, the way that Muslims dealt with death?
No. It was, I mean, I think it was more the way they dealt with life. And I guess, I suppose, in a sense, yes, loss and tragedy is a big part of life. And it may not necessarily be your own death, but it could definitely be the death or the injury or the suffering of those around you. So, what impacted on me personally was how people who are Muslim that I saw reacted to poverty, how they dealt with poverty, like crushing poverty, right? Um, and how were they still happy when they were so poor? It didn't make any sense to me. Like, that wasn't, it just didn't compute. So they were dealing with these struggles, and I saw people dealing with incredible struggles, but they were still happy, and they had an incredibly positive outlook. For me, now it was interesting because my dad, he found, because he went to work in Egypt, so
No.
he found it really frustrating. Everything was, inshallah, malish, in God willing, it's okay, bukra inshallah, tomorrow, right? Like, obviously, as a person who's trying to run business, and whose job is to make money, and who's driven by, efficiency, and what, he found that incredibly frustrating. But for me, it was the opposite. This was liberation. This was literally liberation. Like, because I thought, my God, these people are amazing. They're just so relaxed. They're so chilled. Nothing really bothers them. It's like, yeah, okay, that we should do that, but there's more important things, And it's interesting that my dad really enjoyed the more important things. Like, he was able to finish his day at 3 o'clock and come home and spend time with his family, and play tennis. And a lot of that was because how life was constructed there, right? So on one hand, he was extremely frustrated, but on the other hand, he benefited very much from the whole ethos that was there, right? And for me, it was like, that was the most amazing thing. For me, the most amazing thing about, the Egyptian people, the Muslims, was the fact that nothing ever seemed to get them down. Nothing really seemed to bother them that much. Nothing. And they're always mentioning God. Inshallah, alhamdulillah. Like, God is always being mentioned the whole time. And, for me, I found that really, really, and I'm saying this in the face of many of the people I saw were poor people, were really people who were really poor. But it didn't seem to make them any less happy. In fact, they seemed happier.
Yeah. This is similar to the story of Salman Sugimoto, our guy in Japan. He went to Bangladesh as a Japanese person, Japan being a very affluent society, seeing these poor people who were happier than he was. That was his segue into Islam. It wasn't somebody coming up to him and giving him the cosmological argument.
Yeah, for sure.
Humans, look, Sheikh, humans are looking for happiness. Let's just be frank. That's what they're looking for. Why are, right now, if you just 20 minutes down the road, why are betting shops and clubs filled with people losing their money and their time? Because they're looking for happiness. That's it. That's what we're looking for. Islam it has the ability to give people that type of happiness. And when people can see that, okay, there's somebody who's content with their life, right? There's somebody that can content with their life. They don't need these extreme bouts of pleasure in order to be happy. They can actually live from the outside what looks like a mediocre life, but actually they're pretty content. They are attracted to that.
Yes.
And this is probably, this is another way it can be linked to your willpower course. Controlling your dopamine, controlling your peaks and your baseline and these types of things, because human beings, we today are overstimulated and we are depressed, and Islam gives you a way of life that is going to keep you happy, but it's not going to wreck you in the way that a lot of things in society, a lot of addictions and these types of things actually do. And the most important thing, which, you know, you mentioned Ryan Holiday, and Robert Greene, they work together because obviously one is the master, one's the student, right? You know, they talk about death anxiety. Death anxiety is the greatest anxiety you can actually have. I was looking at, you know, do you remember Big Brother, this program that started like years ago on TV, right?
What, the reality TV,
reality TV, yeah.
Yeah.
So just the other day I came across the first Big Brother that came out, I think 20 years ago or something. The woman who was kicked out of the Big Brother because no one liked her and she got voted out, right? I think her name was Jodie Foster or something like this.
Jodie Foster, the actress.
Well, she became a fact actress afterwards.
Oh, no. Okay, someone else. Yeah. Anyway, you're gone.
No, as in she went on to other shows. But anyway, what was shocking is I just looked at that and I remembered, oh yeah, she was a big celebrity and she went over to India to do the Big Brother in India and the racism row that was going on. I'm not sure if you remember, this is big news back then. Anyway, she came back because suddenly while she was on live TV, she gets a message, right? While she was out there, she got a message on her phone or whatever, that she basically has cancer. She came back to the UK a few months later, she died. And what got me thinking,
I sort of remember now.
Yeah. What got me thinking is she died at the age of 28. Now, I was 28 a long time ago. I was 28 a long time ago. So it got me, I actually started getting anxiety. When I was reading that, her story again, just a few days ago, I started getting anxiety. There's another time I was just, in the British...
I have cancer, yeah?
No, just thinking about the shortness of life. And I was looking at this ancient mummy that was discovered, and it wasn't an Egyptian mummy. It was basically a mummified body because of the environmental conditions. It was really well preserved, with a woman with long, beautiful hair, and all of her features, everything was preserved, and she was well over 3,000 years old with a necklace and everything. I started getting death anxiety. I started thinking, man, she's been dead for 3,000 years. No one knows her name. No one remembers her. She's a figment of imagination for people. And, all of us are going to face that. And I think Islam, what this conflict has shown us, that Muslims can deal with that issue. They can deal with the issue of death, because death is, not going to come knocking at your door when you're a certain age. It can come at any time. And it's the equalizer. It is literally the equalizer. I mean, the narration of the Prophet ﷺ that, about who is the wisest, the ones who prepare, right? So I think that, for me, if I was to break down a lot of the stuff that's going on TikTok right now, and a lot of the stuff that's going on in terms of social media and people getting interested in the Palestinian issue, I'm just boiling it down to death anxiety. I think that could be why people are so attracted to why the Palestinians are so resilient.
Maybe that's part of it. I think, I'm not going to have an argument with you about it. No, because what people are saying is that they're going through all of this suffering and they're still remembering God.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I think so. For a lot of people, it's the suffering, and that how all of that, doesn't turn them away from God, right, is making people realize. I mean, even atheists, right? Like, I think some of it is just, I don't know, like, people are motivated by many different things. Human beings are very strange, right? Some people, they want to study it because, I hate these people, these Muslims, and I want to find out. There was this girl who was a Zionist. She was a full-on Zionist. She'd gone to Israel, joined a kibbutz and everything. And this is, I don't know what's happened to this lady many years ago. And she actually married an Emirati. And and she, subhanAllah, she studied the Quran in order to fight Muslims. So her motivation to pick up the Quran was to fight the Muslims. And She read it and said, "Oh, this is this is the right religion," and became Muslim. MashaAllah. So Allahu Akbar. It's just amazing, you know, how Allah guides people. But I think to go back to the main thing, Sabur, is that the fact that look, Allah is going to guide who He wants to Islam. That's the reality, and whoever He is going to guide is going to be guided to Islam.
Mm.
But you know, we should not be complacent, and there are a few reasons for that. Number one, because if we Muslims neglect the duty of dawah, then we ourselves should be afraid that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish us for that. And He will ask us about that on the Day of Judgment. Right? You see, I got this message from a lady recently who said that she was studying in the US and she had many problems, and her professor helped her a lot. And so she was telling me a little bit about the interaction between her and this professor. And then she found out that this guy who she really felt really attached to him, she said, I loved him, but not in, you know, not in a passionate way, but in the way that he had really helped her so much. She felt this, like even Muslims had not helped her, but this guy had, and he was an atheist. Yeah. But he had said things to her, you know, like, you know, certain things, and she'd given him a Quran, but she'd never really talked to him about Islam. And then she found out that he killed himself. Right? And she was like asking, what's going to happen to him? I said, I wouldn't worry about what's happened to him. I would worry about what Allah's going to say to you. Right? That's what I would really worry about, because his situation is finished now. Right? That's past. But I would worry about what's going to happen. How this guy did all of these things for you, helped you in all of these ways, and you never talked to him about Islam. You never told him about Islam. You never explained to him about Islam, right? You called him your friend, right? You called him someone you cared about, and you never had a conversation with him about Islam. I said, I would be more afraid. I wouldn't. Why are you so worried about what's going to happen to him? I'd be worried about what's going to happen to you. I said, you're treacherous. You are treacherous. You betrayed him. I said, the man was sick. He was so sick and so ill. And you had the cure. But you never gave him it. And that's it, brothers and sisters. You have the cure. People are sick and you have the cure. And we are not giving it to them, brothers and sisters. Right? Like at the end of the day, they can take it or leave it. Right? Like they can take it or leave it. But at least offer it. At least offer them, at least give it to them, at least have a conversation with them, right? So brothers and sisters, really, you know, we don't take this obligation of dawah seriously enough, right? We really, really don't. And, you know, alhamdulillah, Muslims fear Allah about lots of things, but I don't know why when it comes to this matter of inviting people to Islam, we don't seem to have that same level that we fear Allah. We're afraid, you know, what will Allah say to us if we don't help our brothers and sisters in Palestine? But we don't think about what will Allah say to us about the people who didn't know La ilaha illallah, who are our friends and our colleagues, right? And our neighbors. And like I just talking about people who it's easy to have. I know some people it's really hard, tough to have a conversation with, right? It would be really tough. I would really, like, I struggle to think, how can I'd love to, but I don't even see my neighbors enough to even have like a proper conversation with them. But I'm just talking about people that Allah puts in your way, the people that you are there meeting in your life, and you could have these conversations and you don't. And these opportunities are there, sometimes literally in your face. Even the person's almost begging you, and you still don't. Literally begging you to tell me, and you still don't say anything.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Sheikh, because I was thinking about how this circle is completed. We started off with Burke Khan, and then speaking about the Palestine issue, and you gave your example of how the Palestinians asked you to go back and give dawah, because even from a Nusra point of view, a support point of view for the Muslim Ummah, like those Palestinians said to you, if the West came to Islam, they would get supported. Burq Khan, when he accepted Islam, and then his cousin Hulugu is the one who destroyed Baghdad, he actually attacked his cousin. And some historians say that stopped Hulugu from attacking Makkah and Medina and other places, because Hulugu's army was very strong at the time. So even if someone has the mindset of, okay, I want to help Islam, even if they have a strategic mindset, you helping someone accept Islam who is here in the West, that could lead to, you know, other events, and it could help Muslims in many different ways. In fact, there's just a conference today at Regent's Park Mosque. I'm not sure if you know about it. It's about the Victorians who accepted Islam, and you know, they've got some academics and these types of things. Some of those Victorians, they played a key role in the type of freedom that we have today. In the you know, we it's not just a case where you had a flood of migrants just coming into the UK in the 1950s and 60s. Before this, there was Islam here, and those Muslims did work so that the future generations do actually benefit. So, you know, there's a lot of work that's actually happening in the background, and we forget about this. And the other thing I wanted to add, sometimes we should stop thinking about dawah from the perspective of how it's going to be received. You know, you said opportunities are thrown in your face, right? The other day, I just happened to be in the cafe of our building, right?
Yeah.
And sitting right there, I couldn't believe my eyes, was a person who I really don't like. And in my head, for some reason, I didn't think, okay, how is this person going to think about what I'm saying or not saying? Sheikh, my brain just switched off. And I just went over and I just told him, look, you need to accept Islam. You should become Muslim. You know, Isa alayhi salam was a Muslim. And you know the person I'm referring to. He started talking about his, the English heritage, this. And Sheikh, I went into speaker's corner mode. I started refuting him and saying, what do you mean the West? I mean, you know, if you care about the West, Islam is something that will help revive the West, even if you look at it from that perspective, right? Now, when I was thinking in my head afterwards why I said those things, it was not my confidence. It was simply that sometimes Allah just wants the message to be passed on, and you just have to just do your job and don't think about it. Because what surprised me afterwards is that his response wasn't that negative. It's a bit strange. So sometimes, Sheikh, I think with us, if someone asked me, you have to give dawah to this person, I'd be nervous and I'd say, no, I don't want to give dawah to that person. It's going to be really difficult and awkward, and forget that. I'll go to this easy person to talk to in Leicester Square. But sometimes, Sheikh, we don't know. The people who spoke to Burq Khan, maybe they were scared, because according to the narrations that we have, it was Burq Khan who asked them about Islam, this caravan that went off, right? Now, they could have thought, maybe this is a trick, right? Just like Mao asked for criticisms of his policies and then he massacred people. I'm not sure if you know about this, right? Mao actually did this.
Oh my God.
Yeah. You don't know this, Sheikh. Mao actually...
I can believe it. I can believe it.
Yeah. So someone can think, Burq Khan, he's planning on killing me. That's why he's asking me about my religion and to see what I'm going to say. But sometimes, you know, it's not about you. It's literally about just do what Allah wants done, and you don't think about it. You know, sometimes we just we rationalize too much, is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, Ballaghu anni walla, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, sometimes you don't have to say much. You never know, right? The simple, small thing that you can say, but it is a seed that you put in someone's mind, right? It's something simple, but it's very, very powerful, and it sits there. And, you know, and at just the right time, the rain comes, the sun comes, and that seed that you planted, it grows, it becomes something, because that, you know, it's just a piece of the puzzle that the guy is just, you know, he's still trying to figure out things, but you've given that piece of the puzzle. So you should never underestimate, the of course, it doesn't mean you just should say any old nonsense that just comes to your head. On the other hand, I mean, we do encourage people to, as the Prophet said, as Allah said in the Quran, قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي عَدُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ أَنَا وَمَنْ أَتَبَعَنِي. So say, O Muhammad, هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي, this is my way, عَدُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ, I invite to Allah, عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ, which basira means insight, right? With insight, with certain knowledge. So you don't have to be a scholar, but you should know what you're talking about, at least a little bit, right? You should have, I mean, obviously, Saboy, you got, years of Dawah experience. So
Mhm.
just going and talking to him wasn't just some random thing, right? You're right. What you said, is what you said, but
Yeah,
it's
I
still
mean,
based on a lot of experience and interactions that you've had with
it
people.
is. But one of the things, Sheikh, is look, Allah has made dawah so much easier than in the
Yeah.
past. Because nowadays, you could simply hand out a flyer. Now, some people mock this,
Mm.
and there's even memes about, oh, this guy's handing out flyers, calls it dawah. I have seen myself, and I've met with people that a flyer has changed their life. And
Absolutely.
you could be
Yeah.
someone that doesn't even have the ability to speak, or you just are incoherent and you don't have any knowledge. You could give a flyer to somebody and it could
Mm.
actually change their life. Because
Definitely.
there's one story from Japan where there's an imam, and this is a verified story. That imam is still an imam in Tokyo, in one of the downtown
Mm.
mosques. And you'll actually find his story on one of these YouTube Vice News
Mm.
interviewed him. He actually when Vice News interviewed him, and then he was interviewed by another place. There's two different places where you find a story. In one of the places, which I think is covered by Al Jazeera, he is given a flyer by a Turkish imam, a very
Mm.
old man whose name is Nematullah, and he's given a flyer. In one side is English, one side is Japanese, and this man says that when he saw the Arabic, basically the word for Allah, the word for the Prophet ﷺ, he
Mm.
recognized it. He actually says this as a
Mm.
non-Muslim. I recognized it. So sometimes it's not even about the information on the flyer being something rational and something
Yeah.
they understand. Because a few years ago, when I used to try and encourage the brothers in the street dawah, some people get really demotivated because they're like, oh, we didn't get any shahadas today. No one's stopping. And so
Yeah. Anyway, go on.
one of the things I try to remind the brothers of is, you standing here, you have conveyed to some level Islam to every single person that ignored you, because they've seen that somebody is standing here trying to propagate. Like, we forget sometimes even that's enough. Even if they reject your flyer, even if they reject your call, even if they, and this does sometimes happen, they see you from far and they walk a bit more off, a bit more tangent, and they just to avoid getting in your way. Sometimes even that, you've actually had an impact, because on the day of judgment, they know I was walking past a stall. And back in the day, brothers don't do this anymore, but I want to bring this back. This is the golden era of dawah in the 90s and the early 2000s.
Yeah.
People used to have the shahada on the dawah table banner, just clear, just there, just
Yeah.
very clear, the shahada and the meaning, and that's it.
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
So nowadays, we got nice slogans, we got nice different things, but sometimes, Sheikh, is just
The simple stuff, man. Simple,
Yeah.
but back to basics, bruv.
Back to basics. All right, Sheikh, we're at the 1 hour mark. What would you say to wrap up this conversation? We were speaking about the faith of the Palestinians. This is the perfect time to give dawah. Any final remarks on
It's
this?
a really good time to learn how to make. We used to do this dawah training course. Well, we still do it, but I used to do this dawah training course, and part of it was how to make any conversation into a dawah conversation. That was the challenge that we would have. Is like, if you're really smart, you can almost turn any conversation about football, about anything, into a conversation that could be a dawah conversation. So I think, we have opportunities. People are going to be talking about Palestine. People are going to be talking about, what's going on, right? So I think mastering that skill of how to, it's sometimes it's just about having that mindset, brothers and sisters. You put it in your head, right? How can I invite people to Islam? How can I turn this conversation into a dawah? How can I just say something that might get them to think about what Islam is? Even if it's just, you should read the Quran. Let me get you a copy of the Quran. Say something about Allah. Say something about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that is connected with your conversation. Who knows, like you said, what it is that may spark that person's interest. So it's just about making it part of, it should be natural to us. It should be instinctive. It should just be normal for us to think about, what can I say that might make this person interested in Islam?
Yeah. Absolutely. Jazakallah khair for your time, Sheikh. Just want to read out a last comment. I didn't actually know about this, and I hope this is a good example for others to follow. Sheikh Ahmed Didat, you always used to frame the Israel-Palestine crisis in Dawah. He used to invite Israelis to accept Islam. I didn't actually know. I'm not sure if, Sheikh, if you know anything about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sheikh Didat did that, because he, mashallah, reminded this ummah of
bro, back in the days. But when I went to Philistine, I was saying exactly this to the brothers. I said to them, you have to invite these people to Islam. You have to invite these. And they said, oh no, there are the brothers who do this. And I met this group of brothers, 3-4 brothers, who were in Masjid al-Aqsa, and they would give dawah to tourists, and they would give dawah to Israelis. They were giving dawah. And I still remember this one brother, he's wearing a black imama, right? Like a whole black cloak. Mashallah, I still remember him. This tall brother with his beautifully made black imama. There was him and another 2 brothers that used to give dawah in Masjid al-Aqsa, and mashallah, and they would give dawah to, and there are Jewish converts to Islam as well. Of course, they get very badly ostracized and stuff like that, but they do exist. So,
and as you know, Salahuddin Patel gave dawah training in Al-Aqsa, Ayra's dawah training.
Allahu Akbar. There you go. Well, there you go. Mashallah. Fantastic.
Mashallah.
Bless him.
Mashallah. All right. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, for your time. And I want to restart these streams with you. It was really nice having you back.
It was good. It was very good. Inshallah. We'll look forward to another one, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.